describe stress using a seesaw. On one side of the seesaw are the demands that we personally have to face, the tasks that we have to do that day, and the events to which we have to respond. On the other side of the seesaw, we have the resources we draw on to help us deal with those demands. When the demands facing us are greater than the resources at our disposal, we start to feel stress. Sometimes it needs only to be a little thing that tips us over. We also feel stress when we don't have enough demands. We might recognize this as boredom. Give us more to do, and we feel better again. If well-being is the opposite of stress, then it's well-being that we feel when our demands and resources are in balance. This sense of balance is what we adults are aiming for ourselves and the children in our care. Over time, as we get more experienced, some demands appear to shrink because we've become better at dealing with them. But we can also take some of our resources for granted. Over time, we can become so accustomed to some resources that we become desensitized to them. So resources appear to shrink too, leaving us less able to cope with demands. The size of demands and resources changes over time for each of us, and we all perceive them differently. So we need to constantly fine-tune our balance to maintain our well-being.
So, what does this have to do with project portfolio and product management? To answer this question, first we needed to understand what is a system. A system is basically a structure comprised of elements that interact to each other in order to fulfill a purpose. So let's take a look at this example here. A company is a system. This company has a purpose to make clients happy, right? And for this company to make clients happy, first we need sad clients, right? The sad clients are the inputs, are the demands, right? And then we have our resources, our people inside of a company that will interact and make our clients happy, theoretically, okay? So this is easy, right? This is system, but it's not that easy, right? We have competitions. The demands are subject to the market, to the competitions, and every company is competing for the same sad clients, right? So, once in a while, once the clients have, the client is happy, the client will have new demands, and we will start the process all over again, right? And in starting the project, if you did a good job in the first time, your chances to have you be picked by your client is higher if you did a good job, right? So, to balance this, to control this, we call the seesaw game, right? The better the company are at doing that, playing the balance game, turning sad clients, is using the company's elements into happy clients, the better you do this, the most successful is your company, right? Well, so how can we master the seesaw game? Because it's all about business survival, right? Well, if you ask this question to an agilist, he will tell you to take a look at the Agile Manifesto and thinking about the mindset to do that. So let's take a look here. What they said, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it, helping others to do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals in the interaction over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentations, customer collaboration over contract negotiations, responding to change over following a plan. This is important now. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value in the items on the left more. So the problem with that is that every time that I see one thing over another thing, there is no balance. And people tend to forget about the other side. And we also need that there is a disclaimer in the manifesto saying that, right? But people just skip this part, and that sometimes Agile fails in some implementation. So thinking about the systems thinking just for you to understand, is the ability for you to see, to understand the big picture, right? And read the signals coming from the elements and the interactions, and then make decisions to influence the system to leverage the outcome, to make the outcome better, right? So with this in mind, we created this new rereading, this new manifesto. Let's take a look again. We are uncover better ways of developing software by understanding our work environment, our company, as a system serving a purpose, make our clients happy, seeking individuals interaction in balance with the process and tools, the right software in the right time in balance with working soft and helpful documentations, customer collaborations, in balance with contract negotiations, responding to change in balance with following a plan, and therefore, we must recognize, understand, and influence our work environment in a skillful and balanced way when dealing with efficiency and efficacy. Efficiency are the things related to the right side, process, tools, work, and so on and so forth. Efficacy is the discovering side, individual interactions, working software in the right time, customer collaboration, these kind of things, right? So with that in mind, and over the past, 10 years, myself and my team, we've been talking to lots of people from different companies, lots of companies, and we come up with 3 very common pains. The first one, it's about visibility, and it's very common to hear things like that. I don't understand my projects or my product statuses. I don't understand how is my cost, and how is my scope done. It's very hard for them to understand that. They don't have visibility about that, right? And we have a proposition to solve that. And this proposition would be to have a simple data structure, right? And we should have dashboards to do that. Dashboards to track what is going on with the project, how can we track the cost, the deadline, how can we make forecasting, projections, these kind of things, right? The second most common pain we found is regarding data reliability. It's very common to hear that people that need to run the project, they spend too much time gathering data, going to the data and gathering and compiling, and they do this all manually. And this will lead to bad data, which is duplicate data, deprecated, inconsistent, and so on and so forth, right? With that is the data will become subjective to interpretation and will lead you to this problem to compare apples to oranges. It's very bad, right? And it doesn't matter how good is your process, it doesn't matter how good is your tools, if you are, putting bad stuff, the outcome will be bad. This is the giggle effect, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So this is a very common problem. The next problem is about predictability, right? So here we have the feature cone. It's pretty easy to understand. It's very easy for me now to predict what I will be doing in 5 minutes from now, because it's very close to the present. But the further I go to the future, the harder it is to do this forecast. So I'm not sure. Actually, I don't have a clue what I will be doing in 6 months from now. So then I needed to work with probabilities, right? So we needed to solve this problem. How can I make these probabilities better? How can I understand this better? And the other problem is about accuracy, right? At the beginning of the project, right, you needed to size your project. You need to understand what is happening with your project at the beginning, and as the project goes on, and because software is a continuous discovery process, right? You will learn about things, and then your estimation will change over the time. And how can you make this accommodate in your project? And then you also needed to do some simulations. You need to understand, okay, if I cut budget here, what would be happening with my project, right? So those are the 3 most important problems. And the solution for this third one is basically to have a tool that will allow me to make forecasting, and basically forecasting is to use past data to create predictions for the future. It's based on numbers, straight. And also we need the ability to make simulations, right? When we are doing things to answer the what if questions. I mean, what will happen with my project if I add people, if I cut people, if I cut scope, if I cut budget, if I add budget? What is going to happen with my project? Well, keep that in mind. This is the solution that we are proposing. Well, now I'm going to tell you a story about Bob Jordan. He's a very senior manager. He needs to deal with this seesaw game, right? And he has multiple teams that are basically working for multiple projects, trying to make multiple clients happy at the same time. And to tell more about the story of Bob Jordan, let me introduce to Bob. I mean, Igor.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so now I'm going to show you some tools we developed to apply these concepts. Right, so what you see up on the screen, it's what we call the portfolio dashboard. It's a very simple web app that we created that pulls live data from JIRA and assembles this holistic view of my portfolio. So you can see there that I have 6 projects that are in critical condition, like the red ones. I have 2 that need attention, the yellow ones, and at the bottom you see the ones that are on track, all the green ones. So basically, this is my entry point to analyze the healthiness of my portfolio. But let's zoom in into one individual card. So this one is representing the project that we have to colonize Mars. You can see a few things there. I have some readily available information. So I can see right there that we are on week 6 of that project. We have delivered about 16% of the scope. And then we are tracking 3 different variables. I'm tracking the scope, I'm tracking the timeline, and I'm tracking the budget. So for each one of those, I'm comparing actuals against the expected values. Right? So let's use the scope for instance. For the scope right now, I can see that we already delivered 104 hours of the scope. But at this point in my project, I expect it to be within 139 and 258 hours. So I'm outside that bound. That's why the scope is yellow. Another thing that caught my eye in this quick snapshot is the budget. Even though the budget is green, I see a little red icon for the trend. That means that I'm not trending in the right direction. So we're going to have to dig deeper and analyze why that's happening. And lastly, I also see that we have quite a high rate of defects. So I want to understand what is going on as well. So from here, I can drill down. And one of the first things I can do is I can look at the scope chart, which pretty much shows me the scope over time. And this chart basically has 2 main lines. The dark blue line represents the planned scope. So that's the scope that I negotiated with the client. And the light blue line at the bottom, that represents the scope I'm delivering over time. Right? So what the developers are delivering for the project. So in the x-axis, you have the weeks. And then on the y-axis, you have the amount of scope in hours. You can see here like the dotted green lines, that represents the boundaries that I create. So I wanna stay within those boundaries. But here I can quickly see that I'm not within those boundaries anymore. So the dotted gray lines, those are projections. And the way it's looking right now, it's not looking good, right? So it looks like we're not gonna deliver this thing on budget. So another thing that I want to call your attention to here, I have the planned scope with 634 hours. And my total budget that I negotiated with the client is 600 hours. So I already have more scope in my backlog than the hours that I negotiated with the client. So that's a concern as well. And for that, I can take a look at the budget chart. So this one works very similar to the previous one. The difference is I'm looking at budget versus the scope. So again, you have the two lines there. So the red line representing the scope negotiated, and the light pink line, it's like how much we are spending over time. So you can see here that if we continue this trend, I'm going to finish this project pretty much with 65% or 100% overage. So it's looking really bad. So I need to understand what it is that is going on. So for that, I can take a look at the logbook. So basically, the logbook, it's almost like audit trails for the project. So I record everything that goes on in my project. All the past data is recorded here. And I also record any changes to my forecast assumptions. So if my project manager or my agile code decided to do a simulation and they change the assumptions, that's get recorded here. So I can see that in this scenario that I'm sharing with you guys, for some reason, the project leadership decided to double the size of the team on week 8. So that's probably why I'm seeing the upward trend in the budget chart. So I need to understand why that decision was made. So at that point in time, that's when I'm going to probably sit down with my PM and my agile code and understand, okay, so why that decision was made. So what you're seeing right now, it's a configuration screen that I can create different scenarios. Everything that I showed you so far was based in one scenario that had assumptions. But I can create new scenarios. So let's say I want to change the team size again. So what you're seeing on the screen right now, it's a list of scenarios that I can load. The moment I load a scenario, it changes all the charts. So I can go back and look at the numbers again. So basically, that's what I do in my day-to-day, managing the projects for global services. So I spend a lot of time doing analysis and simulation and then working with my teams on how can I balance my portfolio, right? So going back to that initial screen where I had the portfolio chart, I can make decisions. For instance, I have a project that is in red, so it's in critical state. Let's say that that project, it's in red because we're falling behind schedule, right? We might be falling behind schedule. We might be doing good on the budget, on the scope side. So in that situation, I might choose to get a developer from one of my projects that are on track and move to that project. So going back to what Ramon was saying, so I'm trying to balance my demands with my resources. So now let me tell you a little bit about this task board. So this is the tool that we use to manage our projects day to day. So basically, this is just one layer on top of JIRA. So this is also using JIRA as the data source. But we don't use JIRA on the day-to-day to look at the cards, to look at the user stories. I look at the task board because that gives me a holistic view into my projects. I have all the 3 layers together. So the top layer here, that's where I have my user journeys. And then the second layer, I have all the user stories related to those user journeys. And the last layer, the third one, that's for the development subtasks. So when you break down a user story, you might have multiple subtasks to deliver. So the thing about this task board is, again, it gives me a holistic view of a project. I can see everything that is going on. And we added a lot of powerful filtering capabilities and search capabilities. So it makes things very easy for me to find the information that I need to make my decisions. Okay, so you might be wondering at this point if we're not reinventing the wheel, right? So why I'm not using JIRA? Why create all this? So basically, the way we look at this is we're creating a set of tools that we think of those tools as more like as an orchestrator. So I am using JIRA. I'm using Jenkins. All those tools that you guys are familiar with, I'm using them behind the scenes. But we added some tools just to close the gaps in areas that we felt we didn't have enough to make the decisions, like doing the forecasts and things like that. So ideally, what we're trying to create here, it's a process for us to deliver, to go from discovery to delivery using all the tools that we were already familiar with. And by the way, all those tools that you guys saw today, we made them available open source and free. So if you're interested in that, you can come talk to us after this. So the end of the story is, I was saying before, what I want to do is I don't want to spend 80% of my time trying to collect the data, and then parsing through that data, so then I can make that decision. And that was kind of like my life 3-4 years ago. So nowadays, I have that data readily available for me. I have those tools that give me the health checks, and then I spend most of my time, instead of collecting the data, I spend my time steering the projects, right? Like changing the parameters for my project so I can deliver the projects on time, on budget, and I can spend more time mentoring my people as well, and evolving our tools. So just to put everything into perspective, what we aim to accomplish with this, we want to, we look at our work environment, at our projects as a system. So I'm applying like a systemic view of my portfolio. I'm trying to continuously balance demands with resources. As Ramon said before, there's only so much you can do with data, right? So if you have bad data, you're gonna have bad results. So garbage in, garbage out. I want to make sure I'm comparing apples to apples. So now I have a standard way to look across all my projects, right? Because before I had, different project managers, they use different tools and they have different ways to look at the data. So it was very hard for me to have a big picture view of everything that was going on. And we spend a ton of time automating things, automating. So all this data collection, everything that you guys saw today in those screenshots, it's everything automated. And now I can really make my decisions not only based on gut feeling, but I can make the decision based on numbers. Of course, nothing replaces a good talk with your team to understand what's going on, right, on the trenches. So we still want to have those conversations, but I can make decisions based on numbers. And last, I have the capability of running simulations. That's very powerful. You have no idea how that can transform the way you manage your portfolio. So you can change assumptions, you can change parameters, and see, what if I do this? What happens? What if I do that? So with that, I want to open for questions. And again, if you guys are interested in seeing this, we have this running live. I run all my projects using this. We'd be happy to show you the system running live. Thank you.
Is it important for project members to enter their hours into JIRA, or is there a different data source, for logging the hours on a project?
That is correct. So everything that I showed is based on two main inputs: the effort. So my team estimates the effort before we start the work, just to have an idea, right? It doesn't mean we're gonna get it right, but so we need the estimates, and we need to log the hours. So we have a separate billing system that we use to track the hours, but the developers, they log the hours in JIRA, and that propagates to that billing system, so they only have to log once. Good question.
But there is another thing that I want to add. We are working on a way to automatize the work logs. I know that it's a very big barrier for the developers to log the hours. They don't like to do that. And we are finding ways to automatize this process, to infer how many hours a developer spend in a specific task. So we are almost there, and I believe that maybe some months and maybe next year we are going to have something like that.
And how high level or how fine-grained does the tracking of hours have to be? Does it have to be?
I didn't listen. Sorry.
So how accurate the hours need to be?
Yeah. Does it have to be on a small task by small task by small task?
Small task. Yeah. You log the hours at the third level, the bottom level, the activities. Typically, each of those activities last 2 to 3 days.
Yeah. So basically, when we are planning the user story, we have what we call the tech planning phase. So at that phase, whoever is leading that user story is going to sit down with the developers, and they are going to do the breakdown. And then they try to do a breakdown, creating subtasks, development subtasks that are no longer than 3 days, like a rule of thumb, right? So, and then they log the hours at that level, at the subtask level.